from a holistic perspective, how does it all work together?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a big part of understanding what we have going on is the integration of all these different disciplines. And I think it comes out of, the education system started combining different fields. You had sociology and economics, and then we get into socioeconomics. You know what I mean? Multidisciplinary approach to problem solving. It's really sort of trying to advance the thinking and respond to the real complexities of the world. But I think here, we can focus on the infrastructure, the built infrastructure, the buildings, how we deal with the water, the wind, the weather, also the plant systems that we have built up here. I think that's a really important component. I guess also how we are surviving economically, I think is really important to consider. Just the profit and loss, where it all goes, the money that is taken in and then taken and sent out, as well as the real big people component. Really trying to get to the sociology of how organization of this nature that's not a family by blood can work a piece of land. How you can have a farm-based service organization, how you can have a farm-based business organization that serves the community. It's putting all these different components together, I think, is what it's all about. So, yeah, let's try to hit all those features. Feel free to ask me any questions. I guess where we should probably start is to go up here and just get a lay of the land, so to speak, yeah? The south is that way, the north is that way, the wind comes from the west, the weather generally comes from the west, northwest. This is all where everything is in relation to us. I think that is a really important component of DAcres. We really had no intention of being some sort of island or reclusive commune type place. I think the basis of it has always been to be immersed in the broader community, the regional community, all the different aspects of what goes on to make a regional economy and community thrive. So it's our place in the bigger world. But the idea is this is going to be a glass room. This is going to be an addition to the main house. This is going to be a place. I just want to hold everybody's hand. So, it's going to happen, but I'm imagining it. It's going to be a roof that more or less matches that roof, except for a slightly more less severe pitch. So that's like a 912. It'd be like a 412 pitch, and the roof is going to be solid. So all the walls now are going to be glass, clear glass. It's not going to be anything with any tint. So the idea is this room will be able to help us in the wintertime heat the building and also extend the growing season. We've been starting all our plants down in the basement, well, lots of our annuals and so forth down in the basement under fluorescent lights, and it's horrible. It's a horrible sensory experience, and it's a horrible waste of energy. So this is just going to vastly improve the situation for us. And so it was originally on the docket for this construction, like it was part of the initial design. We just sort of ran out of steam. This was a 3-year build-it project, and it was tiring. So I'm glad it's finally getting done. It is a real nice, it's a nice kit. You know what I mean? All this stuff fits together so modular.
Is this going to be the only access point is through here? And you can't go through
Well, we're going to blow out that wall right there.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so put a big slider in there,
Okay.
hopefully, yeah. That's the plan. There's a chimney there, and then we got into all our plumbing and electrical, so we sort of, that's the hole we're going through.
Okay.
But yeah, so it'll have to be a space where we can expand the dining room, and we have big events for food in there. Gina can really cook it up. And so at various times, like the breakfast, there'll be 100 people that come through in a 3-hour time slot, and I have them on the back porch and upstairs. So this will help with that sort of thing. So we keep. Whoa! While we're here, solarium, climate battery. Yeah. How's this going to work? There's these pipes in the back, and these pipes will go up into the high point. So that all the hot air, where all the hot air accumulates, right? That'll be the hot spot. And then those pipes have a fan in them, so when it gets like 80 degrees up there, the fan will force the air down in below the floor. And then right below me is like a manifold, where it's a big tank, 55-gallon drum flipped upside down, and it's got different tubes poked out of it, heading across to this where it comes up. And this is just a grate that's covered up right now with duct tape so the cement didn't get in there. But the air will come back up here. And the idea is that hot air, all that thermal dynamics will get incorporated into the floor. So when it gets warm in here in the spring up high, it'll get the floor warm, which will make it stay warm overnight until the next day where it'll heat up and recharge. So that's where the word, terminology climate battery comes in. It's also called earth tubes. But it's setting up a system, a design system. It's it's going to rely on energy and inputted energy, fans and so forth. But it's really a passive system in some sense. It's a storage mechanism as opposed to a generation mechanism.
This is going to be the greenhouse.
It's going to be a greenhouse solarium. It will also be able to be heated by our hot water system on the roof and by the boiler in the basement, because they're already incorporated into our heating system of the main house, and we have the capacity. We put in radiant tubing into the concrete, so we'll also be able to control the temperature with more or less 3 different ways. You have the climate battery. You have the radiant tubing that supplied heat from the sun and from the wood, as well as directly from the sun. So there's 3 different ways, and that's how you really get a strong system, is you start integrating different mechanisms that overlap.
How does it function in the winter?
Well,
in the summer.
We're going to find out.
Sorry. In the summer when it's like, when you don't want all that?
Well, the idea, now this is being real clear as far as the design and the choice of materials. We chose clear glazing for the walls. Mm-hmm. So that's because we're thinking we're going to try to maximize solar gain in the winter when the sun's low.
How many layers of glass?
It's R4, it's 2. Okay. And then on the roof, we're going with like the SIP, the structurally insulated panels, so to speak. And so they're going to be like R40 on the roof, and it's solid. Because in the summertime, we don't want the sun in here. Right now, the sun, it's going to come in just a little bit, is the idea. At this time of year, and we're going to get curtains.
There you go.
Curtains are going to be important this time of year, get some shade. But also plants.
The plastic piping that runs from the main 55-gallon, are those solid, or are they like perforated?
It's perforated pipe. It's the type of pipe that is commonly used for drainage purposes.
Yeah.
I think they call it perforated pipe, perf pipe and stuff like that.
So the hot air won't be directly coming from the intake to the outlet. It'll percolate through.
It'll percolate through, and the idea was we filled in gravel all around that pipe,
so the air could
transfer horizontally and be stored within that medium as well.
So you see the room being totally comfortable in winter. I mean, that's your hope.
You have to come back and find out.
I think, if it comes to a week of negative 20, and, our goal may be just to keep it above freezing. If we really got into passion fruit and bananas and stuff like that really, we don't probably belong up here anyway. So if you're going to that extreme, then you're probably going to. But I think, if we're just growing kale and mache out here over the winter, and some trays and set up, as far as getting us through the winter greens, I can get down to 0. I think that'll be fine. Cover them up with green egg. I think the idea is for all around, you know, for us, these drape trellis works really great because it kept people out of our kitchen garden. People would come stomping through. So this is like a little fence.
Yeah.
And it's sort of designed into the place to keep people out of our kitchen garden. Just a little trick, so to speak.
So this is summer kitchen.
I guess for the as well, you know, just having that cool space out front, that trellis is really nice. And we're trying to get the dang hops to go right over the top there, so that'll be even cooler on that front porch area. So it's trying to integrate that plants into your built infrastructure and making all these different traffic flows and climate patterns work to your advantage. All right. While we're on the plant zone, you can see this was all forest when we got here. You know, before we got here, the settlers had come and they'd made this field. You can see the old stone wall the settlers made. But when we got here in 1997, this was forest. So what we've been trying to do to a large degree is to recognize the value of the native vegetation, the native woodlands, and then also look at ways to recompensate. I don't know if this is a word.
It is now.
It's a recomposition of the northern forest. So we would definitely love, like these blueberry. We didn't plant this blueberry. This blueberry was here when we got here, but it was an itty bitty little thing, you know, just barely scraggling along in the shade. But when you give it full sun, you're more or less freeing it up to do what it does in a meadow, and it just starts producing like mad. So we recognize that. We also recognize like the serviceberry. Like all these serviceberries were here when we got here. And they're just, you know, you see this whole row or everywhere. But on the way, we'll stick us in a cherry. Why not? You know? You got this much sun and you got this road space right here. I'm really not worried about shading my road. Why not pop a tree in right here as well? So that's what I'm talking about, sort of recomposition. You got an understory plant, a blueberry that was native, some other native plants. Well, you got a little space here, stick in your serviceberry. Over there, there's a Nanking cherry. There's actually two of them over there as well. So, and then, you know, we're pushing down the understory, the stuff that's really raspberry. Trying to suppress that a little bit, and trying to add some other things over time, but using a sheet mulching technique to try to suppress the raspberries right here. Other places we'll be using animals, pigs primarily. But it's a matter of taking this northern forest, which is very vibrant, alive system, and changing it. Utilizing some of the existing species and the existing forms, and changing some of the composition, the species composition.
Why do you want to suppress the raspberries there?
Those particular raspberries aren't cultivars and aren't going to be tasty, so to speak. I mean, they'll probably produce some raspberries, but they're not like the canes
like
that
a
you
bramble.
normally cultivate and that you're thinking of. All right, so what else we got along this stretch? There's another cherry, some hawthorn, some elderberry, tons more serviceberry. We got witch hazel, more elderberry, more blueberry here on the edge. See, this is why I'm giving you guys this tour. I want to eat blueberries. And off in the back there, and this is just for your eyes only. Unfortunately, I'm not going to let you go back there. You can see some gooseberry. See that plant right there on the corner? That's my secret stash right there. I've been going to that one back there. It's been quite good for me. Oh, you picked it?
I put them in the
Oh, you
solar
did, didn't you?
dehydrator.
Well,
We'll have to check out the solar dehydrator.
The understory of this zone as well, we've been trying to plant in. There's lots of mullein and valerian and walking onion in there as well. And there's a medlar in the overstory. And then you get into the nuts. This is a heart nut. There's a northern pecan right there. The medlar you can see, it's got a little bit of fruit on it. It's just a small tree right there. What is a medlar? Is it like, what's it comparable to? Medlar? sort of looks to me like chestnut from here. There's elderberry in the background.
Want me to walk in there?
You guys stay where you are, because this is a mess right now. We're trying to figure out where the paths are. This is the medlar, and the fruit is just ugly as can be.
Kinda.
See the fruit? It's a, huh?
Can you bring a fruit back to show us?
No, I won't be able to eat it in the springtime because you see
The-
they taste better after they've been frozen.
So you don't pick them until after fries.
Yeah. That's what it looks like. It's an old English fruit.
It's
They
sort
went to
of
that after they had kind of sat on there and then fermented,
Sort of looks like a rose.
and they were.
Yeah.
I thought they were
So
pretty
this
good.
is still
I've never-
coming.
Never heard of
Yeah,
that.
it's not ready
It's
yet.
not right.
Oh no.
Yeah, we
I wouldn't eat that at all.
It just looks like it's gone by.
No.
like it's
Oh, really?
No, it
Not
turns
bad
into
because
like
they
when you eat
freeze.
it's sort of like eating applesauce.
Mm-hmm.
It's gotta like it has to like
Does it get much bigger?
almost like ferment a little bit.
No, it doesn't get much bigger. It's smaller than
Maybe
an
about like
apple.
that big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a big plum.
Yeah.
When do they typically ripen?
After a frost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
frost. So
Did you
it
want
could
to
be
freeze?
November 1st.
Oh, okay.
But there's a little sequence happening here, a little polyculture we'll speak to. It's the heart nut, and then in the foreground, sort of on a half moon there on the southern side, is blueberries. And then this plant, this elecampane, is another one that we really like. Once again, another plant that we probably started with a flat 10 years ago, and then have let volunteer and make itself at home here. And it's got medicinal qualities, but what I really like about it is just it looks like a jungle boogie plant, huh? It's got just a very strong looking vascular system. That shows to me that this plant is able to pump hey, relax, you got some in there if you want some. The idea is it can pump nutrients up from below the subsoil where, this grass and this clover just can't reach stuff like that. This thing looks like it'll go down 6-8 feet and really pull up nutrients. Which at the end of the season, this falls over, this decomposes, and then it becomes available to that upper layer. It's really about translocating nutrients. Trying to get calcium, trying to get magnesium, trying to get all those rare earth minerals from 6, 8, 10 feet down and bringing them up and making them available. That's why a system like this, when you can get it going, really seems to be super effective, because that heart nut right there, you see how tall it is, it's probably as deep, and bringing up nutrients from way deep where the blueberry can't reach. The blueberry's got a really shallow root system. So they bring in the nutrients and feed the blueberries. It's like a mulch system. We haven't really had to get in there and do much but harvest for the past couple years. I need to get in there and probably trim that willow back or whatnot, but I can tell you how absent I've been is to let that willow get that tall. This little bitty thing, it's like 6-8 feet. So I haven't had much work to do in there. It's mainly the housing we've chosen for the people living here. And when we first moved here, it seemed like a good way to get off the ground and be dry and really be minimalist. And they really functioned well for that. We don't have a lot of capital tied up in them. There's lots of recycled materials incorporated in the construction. It's been a great learning activity for people around on the farm to get their hands in banging nails and screwing in stuff. And then they serve the people that are living here really well in terms of getting us some privacy. We share a whole lot of time together, and it's nice to be able to spend some time by yourself. We're going to get to that. So the start is just taking in this outdoor space. Summer kitchen, we'll call it.
This is the place.
I think a lot of it is just taking design and vernacular ideas from places that are a different climate. This isn't a typical New England construction. This isn't probably a typical European construction. I think it's a lot more typical like equatorial regions, which seems just a good idea for a summer We don't use this in the winter. We're not going out here in the winter. But in the summertime, you have a structure like in the equatorial climate. Those people are used to building for the season. So this has served us real well. It protects you from the driving rains, but lets the breeze get right up in here real nice. Keeps it nice and cool, even though it's attached to a hothouse. So the hothouse got built first. It was gifted to us. Somebody had taken that off their house, and a contractor had called us up and said, "I'm taking something off someone's house you might want, and this is the address." And so we went and picked it up, and after a couple times of moving around those big heavy trusses, we got sick of doing that and decided we better build something with it. And so we built the greenhouse, and then we got to yammering and thinking, and what would be nice would be a summer kitchen, close to the cob oven, and yada 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 yo. And this sort of fell into that scenario, sort of evolved right out of it. And now, because we have the water all strung out here for the irrigation and for the hot water to do the dishes, we also got water now we're using down below as part of like a vegetable washing station. We brought water and said, oh, what can we use with water? And then have this shady spot, vegetable washing station. And then to deal with all that water, now we have a little mini gray water system that feeds into our waterworks. So it's sort of just trying to tie components together, not necessarily based on overall like original design either, but as we go, trying to complement and integrate different systems. So once again, it's like the building vernacular is reuse and on-site. So these posts came out of a house that had gotten blown up. It was like some propane explosion, and this was all that was left. It was like six posts of this ironwood stuff. It's really incredible wood. And it's super hard, and it's got a lot of character. So, all right. And then there's those posts over there that came out of somebody else's house. Some hand-hewn posts. So that's more or less what's supporting the place. And then all the aerial components came from the land. Either were just milled. 2 sides or sometimes 4 sides, and then the round wood. And then there was some roofing that somebody else had used somewhere else, but had no longer the need for. So we come by that, and there you have it. Come out real well. And then you can. So yeah, they're like clusters. They'll get a little bit bigger than that, maybe about the size of a table grape. Something like this nature. And then they, right about the time, September, mid-September, you're about to get the first frost. They'll get nice and soft, and they're quite tasty. They taste like a kiwi. They're not fuzzy. You just eat them whole. Mm-hmm. This is a tree, a little vine that's been around for probably 5 years, 6 years. Whereas this one's been around for like 15.
Oh, wow. Well, there's multiple ones in there.
Same thing on like the apple. You see that apple tree down there? That's going to get, a solid half bushel, 3/4 bushel off it, but it's 15 years old.
What a great vine shed.
We hang garlic in here as well.
Everything that needs real.
As far as the overall, I think that's a really big, important part of trying to figure out the DAcres, how it works, and the whole system. I mean, we really just want to get people on the farm. I mean, the videos and the educational, and I could go out and give a talk or whatnot. It's super helpful and all that, but it's great when people get out here, whether they're hardcore enthusiasts of permaculture or they're just a family that's looking to see some animals and understand where their food comes from. And that's sort of the basis of the organization, is to connect people with the hands-on approach to solving the crises and dilemma we currently face. So it's about getting people out here, and then when we get them out here, if we can figure out ways to value add our experience and their experience, and putting the food into their mouths is just the best darn way to do it. This is the best thing we've seen. I mean, it's great if you sell them some vegetables and so forth, but if you can show them how to actually prepare them and get down with it and make it taste really good, that's the hook right there. Because I think once people really taste that food, that fresh food, it makes all the difference. So that's what we're trying to do, and it's just the different ways to do it, whether they're overnight visitors, or we're having some sort of food event, or we're having a cooking class, or they're coming as like a school group and they're just spending lunch with us. And sometimes they won't even necessarily eat the food we're eating. Like the school group will come and they'll have their packed lunch and their little chips and food, but at least they like they'll look at it and be like, and maybe try a little taste, put some on their chips or something. Some of that the garlic skate pesto on their chips. Oh yeah, that's a big success for us. Because that probably doesn't happen in the school cafeteria. But it's little steps like that. You get them on the farm, you can really make a huge impression. I think that's. I was coming here when I was growing up 2 weeks out of the year. I lived in North Carolina, which is really agricultural and so forth. There's a rich agricultural history, but just when you're immersed in contemporary society, just growing up in that pace and with those expectations, you don't really get a sense of the value of rural existence and the value of being this close to nature and the value of knowing where your food comes from. So I was real fortunate to come up here as a youth and experience that. It stuck with me good. During the meal, we talked a little bit about that whole ownership perspective. Really, I think that is some of the root of the problem, is just this belief in the importance of that, or the doctrine of that, and how it's affected all our social systems and all our economic systems, and trying to figure out a way to transcend it and improve upon it and get that system to evolve, I think is very important at this juncture. The ownership crises. Anyway, that's a digression. So we're just going to help you with your squash. It's just not the honeybee. The European honeybee is really good at producing a lot of honey and the bounty thereof. But as far as being an effective pollinator, there's loads more effective pollinators out there.
And it's not native.
Yeah, it's not native.
Yeah.
So something was happening before they
Correct.
brought them here.
Well, the idea that we have is just to build a really strong system on site that's building that abundance. So that's the birds and the bees. Like, the more birds I see here, the more excited I get. They're keeping down our insect population and serving to aerially bombard this place with fertility. They're really effective. Mm-hmm. So let them do that. It sounds really beautiful. I honestly have no problem with birds, so bring them on, as many as we can. Share. You got to produce a little bit more in these times to share. And it's the same with the bees. The bees can't get enough of them. That type of insect that's serving to pollinate. When you need them for 2 weeks in May, you got to think about them for the rest of the 50 other weeks. Mm-hmm. You just got to be focused on that, how they're living, particularly from frost to frost, because that's when they're out and about. So as much flowering, umbelliferous, just things that are going to make them healthy and happy. Want more of that. The thing I guess I've been experiencing with those nut trees is like when we first got the heart nut, it was zone 5 and didn't really know if it was going to make it up at this climate. And so, since then we were like zone 3 then. And since then we've been moved to more or less zone 4. But at that juncture, zone 5, it seemed like a big chance. Now I plant something zone 6, I try it anyway. But at that juncture, so just planted 2, and they come. You pay $20 and you get a little twig. It got no roots on it at all, no white roots, nothing to speak of. And you plant it out in the field, and it's a big chance. taking a chance. Really, you're trying to nurture it that first couple of years. But the heart nut, the first two came. One of them died right off. The one that got planted with that big on one. And then so we waited for a couple years, and we figured, trying to figure if it was a fluke or not. So we got about 4 or 5 years old, that big one. And then we'd say, oh, well, we'll go ahead and plant some more. But I would think now, if I would ever try anything, I would always try to plant at least 3. Just because even if it's self-pollinating, because it's only going to help the pollination scenario. And you might lose one, you might lose 2. It's just the nature of it. So I always try to plant now in 3s, at least. That's my little lesson. So there's like a heart nut right there, and there's another heart nut. There's like 6 or 7 of them in the vicinity all around. And that's another thing. That's taking up a lot of space. And eventually, those trees are going to be mongo. So it's just sort of planning on that, How's that going to affect? I always thought about putting a wind generator right here. So it's this time horizon and dealing with that sort of long-term perspective on the landscape and how that integrates into the economy. I mean, I don't necessarily, or the food aspect, I don't necessarily want to be stuck in the meat production business. I'd rather get into the nut production business. And it's just a long road to get there. I mean, literally getting probably 20 walnuts this year off. Got at least planted 10 to 15 years ago, and have kept up with them for 15 years. And so it's some big investments to get into that perennial food crop.
So a heart nut is a good nut to eat? I never heard of it.
I've been told.
Okay.
With the walnuts, does it typically take that long to get the kind of production, or it all depends on the site?
It depends a lot on the site, and it also depends on the, when you say site, the latitude. So, if you're at the northern fringe of a plant's capacity, and they say 5 to 10 years, you'd probably be looking at 12.
Yeah.
It's just the nature of this sort of business. I mean, we've seen nuts, but haven't seen them in a production mode. And still, when they're telling you that in the catalog, 5 to 10 years, it's like, well, you're going to get 1 nut after.
Right.
So, and then next year 3, and then next year 7, and then, you might skip a year and you got none, and then you'll be back up at 12, and then you're at 24, and then you're at 200, and it sort of goes from there. But it takes a while.
I think you guys have some American chestnut planted, right?
Yep.
And how old are those?
Depending, I mean, some of them, the oldest ones, half of that batch got affected by blight.
Yeah.
So you're back to square one on that. Yeah, but we have some 6, 7, 8-year-old chestnuts.
Do they have nuts yet?
No.
No.
No, haven't seen any real nut production on anything but the hazelnuts, and still trying to figure out exactly how to get them before the birds and the squirrels do. Because they're just right after them, and the plant, maybe it's some of us plant, is like, it's a big, big plant that it's not dripping with nuts. Not necessarily yet. There's nuts on it, but it's not like an apple where you're picking, or a blueberry where you're right there just picking one out. They're high, and they're just, I think it might be, I know a lot of people are looking at the hazelnut as like a agroforestry type crop, but it might be the type of thing that's best harvested with mechanization and planted as a row crop, and something that you're going to be going along and doing acreage of, because it does seem like it's going to be challenging to figure out ways to home cultivate. So these places serve for solace and meditative moments and potentially quiet conversations. Whereas the house, the phone is always ringing and there's really always something to do. So it's nice to be out here. It really is a crucial component, I think, of the infrastructure. I know all kinds of co-housing type experiments that seem very successful. I think it's very rare that you find some that are also cooperating on the business end of things. It's just too, could be too close. There might be a threshold. And so privacy is important, especially for intimate relationships, family relationships. There's got to be some space. So trying to figure out different ways to do that. And this is one that's, like I said, super economical. We probably got like $200-300 into this, some nails and whatnot, some wood, milling costs and stuff. But most of the wood came from on site. Pretty low embodied energy. We've gotten into these steel beams. These beams were salvaged, but the wood beams would generally, this would be the weak link in the treehouse construction, because there's just no way to keep them dry. The tree keeps getting wider, so it's really hard to flash it without more or less girdling it. So it's difficult to keep the water from migrating down it and then just rotting it out through capillary action horizontally in
So
the
are there
typical
issues
beam.
with attaching to a live tree?
Well, yeah, I've seen lots of them die. The idea would be get a tree that's, vibrant. I wouldn't get a tree that's really at the end of its life. I would watch out for trees that are leaning. I would be careful when you're drilling the hole for if you're going to do like a 3-bolt like this or whatnot. If you leave holes vacant, they will rot very quickly. So if you drilled in the wrong spot, you might just have to use that spot. Because if you decide to drill in another spot and don't stick something in that hole, then you might be in trouble. That's what I've seen from my own experience. But if the tree is vibrant, it could go. I mean, this tree is just growing right around. It's not stopping this tree for nothing. And you look at that maple. These 3 particular trees have really worked well for this. There was a bolt on here before, but it done ate it up. You can see over here, it's ledger, and the steel, it's growing right around it. It'll go right around the whole thing before it's all said and done and hold it. But yeah, the tree's, working, it's growing from the tip and working outwards. And yeah, the tissue will graft and do all kinds of funky stuff if you let it.
Where are you? How did that?
Bird wants me.
They're listed as cabins. Yeah, I mean, there was language in there that was like non-permanent foundation and stuff like that. But once you get 4 walls and a roof and you got people sleeping on something, it's hard not to call it a cabin. There's about 6, I believe, on the property. And there's various other type shanties or, houses that are more or less 3-season. When you get into insulation, you got 2 problems around here. You got the rodents and then the moisture. Just figuring out ways to insulate stuff without those 2 getting to you, that's the hard thing.
I've had people who did it just said select changes.
Alright, any questions, thoughts, comments?
How are the lights powered?
We use a 12-volt power system. They typically bring down a car battery. You just get an old car battery that won't start a car anymore. It'll run a light for days. And then
usually 2.5 weeks.
That usually works for night lights and radios, that sort of thing. You can take the old car battery and stereo and just hook it up to anything 12-volt. And then there's other ones that have a little solar panel on them that you don't have to take them down to recharge them. The solar panel, but this one's sort of shades. We were talking a little bit about predators and the predator pressure up here. And I think it does sort of play into this thing about abundance and sort of caretaking and design choices. We've lost lots of chickens here over the years. We lose poultry nearabouts every year to one thing or another. And then, we've dealt with all kinds of things: owls, foxes, weasels, all kinds of vomits. Yeah, you're losing birds. And sometimes the sad thing is they don't even really eat them. Sometimes they just kill a whole bunch of them. Raccoon or something, just kill a bunch of them. It's no fun. But the pigs, we haven't really had a problem with any predators so far. We've heard about bears jumping in with piglets into a house and stuff like that. We generally keep the houses closed at nights with piglets in them. But we haven't had a problem. I guess it would be something you would encounter early in the spring. Haven't really seen that. Deer, we don't really have a problem with. They seem to like it in the valleys. Maybe I think they're like people. They probably don't like climbing hills if they could stay in the valleys, you know. It's sort of the nature of it. There's less probably browse. There's less oak up here, I know. It's probably less acorns. But we don't have a whole big bunch of deer pressure. We also have all those people living in various sectors of the property. So you have you have this epicenter and you have the food production around the epicenter, but different people's little shanties and shacks are in all directions. So you have your human presence here is pretty well spread out across the property, and I think that sort of human presence can deter critters, varmints. We do have some wind chimes and windmills. I think the wind chimes are really effective at keeping deer away. That's my 2 cents. I would put in more wind chimes. And broader questions of like the designs and systems of designs we're looking to produce through our efforts. I think there's definitely a tendency in conventional industrial agriculture to get into a monoculture idea where you just get into corn or you get into soybeans and you produce as much as you can. And that's the goal, to produce, 80 bushels of corn an acre, 120 bushels of corn an acre, that sort of thing. For us, like, our overall goal is to just produce abundance. Like, it just that is the answer to the question. So when it comes into doubt, and, I think I didn't answer the question very well earlier in regards to, like, gooseberry. When it comes into doubt on something like that, we have chosen to go for abundance. And particularly species that are low maintenance, abundance producers. So when you look at the mullein, and you look at the elecampane, and you look at the comfrey, and you look at the currants, blueberries, cattail, when I look around, apple, it's the type of species that are able to endure and proliferate without much help. And so if it is going to be a species like a chestnut and so forth, like, we'll try it and so forth, but it's not something we can afford to bet the farm on. The raspberries, the blueberries, the currants, the Asian pear, the apples, the things that are just strong performers, horseradish, good grief. These are ones that I think you really can base a system upon. Yeah, and I think that depends a lot on your land base and what you find through experimentation. I mean, we definitely didn't know that mullein and elecampane would thrive like it has here. Didn't have that presumption when we planted that flat. We were hopeful in some senses, but it was really a shot in the dark looking at different things. And also recognizing what's on the land. I think there's an abundance to say hawthorn here. There's all kinds of uses for, all kinds of utility for it that is underexplored. So that would be a species that I've sort of recognized over time as a potential yield from the property and the existing vegetation. But hawthorn is another host species for scab and for plum cuculia. And so when you think about that, there was a time where Michael Phillips was recommending cutting down all the hawthorn and native apples within 3 miles if you could of your orchard. But that seems sort of ridiculous. So trying now to move forward with this path, and it is. It's somewhat dubious at times. Like when the motherwort or the Jerusalem artichoke or the what's that? Knotweed comes in abundance. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? You know, knotweed. Ooh-wee. It's moving up the road. It's right down the street there. It's within 100 meters.
Thanks. Autumn olive is one that I have. It's spreading all over.
Yeah, and the Elaeagnus in general, that whole subgroup, there's some wonderfully robust and prolific berry producers in that subspecies, and you just wonder, are they all going to be the next autumn olives? Are they going to spread like they become a problem? But they, we have some subsets over across the street, and it's I've chopped down a whole bunch of them that we're planning at one point in time, being like, and just can't decide. Regina really likes the fruit leather being made by the Elaeagnus across the street, but it's not an olive, but it's really close. It's within that species type. You just don't know whether, is that going to be a crop that potentially is a great nitrogen fixer and surprise a subsistence food for generations to come? Or is it going to be something that's going to be malign us for generations to come? It's difficult questions once we get into designing with species. It becomes like this, it's a lot broader than annual food production. You get into this perennial design element of food production, because we don't know which of these species could potentially be of harm to us. Is hops going to take over? Probably not, but it's some, I think there's been lots of bittersweet, obviously, juice that doesn't seem to have any redeeming value.
It's taking over. So is the Virginia creeper.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it's we're looking for prolific species that can thrive on their own, that have benefits, that are going to be able to cooperate together. And it requires a lot of management, a lot of supervision. It's like that with our nettle patch. We love the nettle. It's really nutritious, but gosh, it stings. And it's so robust. I don't know how we're really going to keep it under control over the years. I mean, we started with a little bitty plant, and it's patch. It's up against the side of that barn. We put it up against the side of the barn, so it would only spread in one direction. But who knows? If we left for a season, it would definitely be out of control. We'd never get control over it again if it's seeded heavy one year. I mean, it requires 3 times a year at least cutting it down to the ground. Thoughts, concerns? Are we causing crisis by trying to solve crises? Yeah, no, definitely. I think that all these are really pertinent questions, and definitely in our haste to try to find solutions and find some sort of miracle plant, miracle crop, miracle thing that's going to solve a dilemma. Is that really the most important thing? Are we better off just learning how to grow vegetables better, learning how to grow the apple tree better, learning how to grow our most basic things better than exploring all these varieties from all over the world? So, it's interesting questions. You guys want to go look at a kiwi?
Yep.
There it is. It's a whole bunch of the Joe Pye weed, comfrey, the elecampane, the mullein.
Water celery.
Oh boy. The water celery is down. Can you see it? Yeah.
It's like above the cattail. You can't see it really.
You got a bunch of willows down
The willows, we've the willow is really easy to procreate. You can just cut it early in the spring and stick it in the ground, and it'll root right up nice. So we've chosen to stick it in where we felt like there was going to be heavy erosion pressure, trying to get some roots in nice and solid here where the water flow is happening. But this area is, more or less, this is the road runoff coming through here. So we're looking to clean it, concentrate it, and then as it flows down this terrain, we're looking to disperse it. So it comes in hot and heavy as runoff, and it's moving quick. What we're looking to do is clean it and then to redisperse it into the landscape, and just raise the whole water table, plus provide this resource for the ecology. And eventually, if we ever get around to it and 15 people end up living here, we'll probably expand our gardens further down and be able to use that water and continue to concentrate and amplify and disperse. But this would be one of these ideal locations as this water is going down through this system to begin thinking about the rice production, because you'll be able to preheat the water through these different terraces. They got pruned. It's all a question whether something like this is a proper pruning, and we didn't even do a good midsummer pruning. But they got a good hacking back this spring, and you can see, I really wish that we get as many people as we can in here, because if you look above my head, they're probably 25 pounds, I'd say.
Go after you.
And when do these typically ripen?
Mid-September.
And they are delicious.
Oh, yeah. No, it's great fruit. Really, as far as the fruit and everything, we could have definitely come up here and just rolled with blueberries and just had, by this point, 750, 8,000 plants up here. Ugh, I can't imagine living like that. Being in a situation where, for 1 month, 6 weeks out of the year, I was pruning one thing. And then get onto it, and 6 weeks later, you're into harvesting one thing for 6 weeks. Just imagine it being awful. It's sort of a nightmare. Maybe it's a livelihood, but with something like this, we have blueberries. We have a bunch of blueberries. We probably have 100, 150 plants around here. We get a lot of blueberries. We get as many as we can handle. We've been buying 20, 25 plants a year for 10 years in a row. So it adds up. You get a lot of fruit, and you're able to get it in and freeze it. And then something like this comes along later in the year, and you might not have enough to really make something unique with it. You know what I mean? Like kiwi jam. Yeah, you might make a couple jars. But if you can mix it and blend it with all these other fruits, you mix your kiwi with your apple, with your blueberries, or trying to figure out things that are all ripe at the same time, or things that you have in abundance from before, and trying to mix and blend, I think that's where it's really going to be at. That's where it's at with the flavor.
Oh, yeah.
When you get, this morning I had black currants mixed with raspberries, mixed with blueberries, with my granola. Good lordy. It's really, I really wish I could share that type of experience with other people. Especially somebody you meet like on an airplane or something, and that's the kind of environment, where everybody's congested and so forth. It's really sort of on principle. We're just really into a mulch system and a forking system of cultivation. Just really focusing on building soil and not creating like plow pan and destructive cultivation techniques. That being said, we do use fossil fuel powered equipment for other purposes around here related towards soil building. We do have a skid steer, and we're using that to turn compost on a big scale, like a big compost facility up the road, on the property, but it's its own unit. And we also have the wood chipper. So, I mean, we don't really have another effective way to use this biomass unless we chip it down. It's just not turning. I mean, I've done like brush piles and so forth, and stacked the brush and chopped it into little pieces and stuff, and it'll still be a brush pile after about 10 years. But if I can chip it up and incorporate it with hay and manure and so forth, I can turn it into tomatoes in less than 2 years. So that's sort of the process. We're really relying on the northern forest as fuel for our fertility program. So yeah, it's sort of conscientious use of fossil fuels and mechanization, and making selective choices based on principle. So we're really steering clear from mechanization in the soil, but building the soil through other means of mechanization. Wowzers. Anything else you guys are checking out? I've been using a weed whacker this year. Never really used a weed whacker on the property. I used, a bunch when I was growing up as a kid, landscaping and stuff like that. But we did get up a weed whacker. I've been using more the hand sickle in years past, but the vegetation this year just was getting away from us. The weeds in the garden, as well as just it's been hard to hay. People are just going hard to keep up with this. So the weed whacker's been saving me time. Where I've been using it is just providing feed for our animals. I'll just go through a section. Like this section is getting sort of tallish. I'll whack all this stuff with a weed whacker, use half a tank of gas, maybe a full tank of gas, and that's my feed for my oxen for the day. So sort of keeping down the brush, getting it into the oxen, they turn it into poop. Goes back into the garden. This grass isn't really good for anything right there, you know what I mean? But if I can get it into the fertility system.
Oh, I got this.
Yeah, cool. But we're just looking in here. There's nothing really. There's an apple press and just a whole bunch of pork. Just a whole bunch.
For sale.
For sale. It's a value-added way we're getting by up here. I think can't overemphasize, like we have a bunch of outbuildings all around. They're just filled up with stuff that we use on occasion, but sort of need. We need storage space for the meat. We need storage space for the circus tent. We need storage space for the apple press and the bicycle-powered way to get it going. Upstairs, if you go up those stairs over by Regina, there's a whole bunch of nettle and lemon balm being dried. And it's just a hayloft that my uncle and aunt used. This was their primary animal shelter, but it makes a wonderful drying space. So yeah, there's probably about 75 pounds of nettle hanging upstairs. It's going to go into our tea for the winter. Another value-added product. So what we're looking at here is infrastructure that's making our economic processes happening. This wasn't very accessible or very appealing necessarily for people to come eat out of a barn, and so to share food, sanitation is just such a huge concern that we looked at this barn and this living space and we're just like, this is really great for a bunch of hippies, but who else would want to live like this? Who else would really, the credibility and the ability to connect with different segments of our population who weren't necessarily 3 times a day granola eating type of people. Just this barn is really a great facility for and I really miss it. I have a lot of nostalgia for living in this barn and having a 5-gallon bucket in the sink where we collect our water and so forth, and then water the plants with it. But making it a place that's accessible to a broader range of the population was really important to us. And particularly, we were working with my aunt across the street, and she was 89 years old when we moved up. So trying to make a place that was accessible and a place where she felt at home, and we could get a bunch of different people from the community together, we decided to upgrade and build that community building. So, everybody's having a wreck today. Somebody else had a wreck. She's going back. She's going to be all right.
She did belly
Belly
flop.
flop. We got a belly flop out right. You got a headbanger and a belly flop. All right, we should head up to the upper field. Stuff like this comes in threes, so everybody be safe.
Accidentally, catch jacked up.
When we were hilling potatoes with 14-year-old girls, it's all about trying to make sure it's not gross. And really trying to get to the fundamentals of what the heck is a potato good for? And really, I do like potato. I like French fries. I like mashed potatoes. I like, and really getting them to think about it. Because before, they walk up here, they see a big pile of compost, and you're telling them they're going to have to get in there with their hands and spread that compost around the plant, and they're just looking at you like, no, no.
Or they've never used a shovel before.
Never used a shovel. It's something that if you try to shovel with your left hand and you're right-handed, you have an appreciation for that really quick. Lots of volunteers.
But still, by the time you taught them all that and they stay an hour, it's hardly worth it.
Well,
except for community.
Yeah, and the positive aspects of it, and you get a lot done. You can get a lot done. This is how. This area right here was forest when we got here, yeah? This was all forest. You can see the big pine stump right there. So we started clearing it 7-8 years ago and got in there and got our firewood and made a bunch of chips and so forth. Probably built some stuff with it. And then put the pigs to it. So the first year we had the pigs, we had all this enclosed. And within like a month, they moved in April. And within like a month, they had totally got this area. We were probably feeding them right there too. They totally gnawed down this area. So we just took the fence and moved it back. And then went in here and put potatoes right on the ground in rows like you see. And then over the course of the year, we just hilled them up like you see. And so at the end of the season, you come in here and harvest, but what you're left with is just like, ooh, goodness. So you get pretty decent potatoes, as well as you've just created a raised bed that the fertility in this, properly managed, could go for a long time. Long time. Proper crop rotation, building soil with cover crops and so forth. Really get a lot of mileage out of this. And the beauty of it is, it was a forest less than 10 years ago.
Now the straw over the potato plants is for building soil, or is this for growing potatoes? Or is it both?
Moisture retention, weed suppression, and then you're getting some soil building out. You're building the soil composition with the tubes and everything. But primarily I'm looking for erosion control, moisture retention, and weed suppression. But yeah, the potatoes, if we'd gotten a little bit of moisture over it, if it rained or something, I think they would have been even more vigorous. This got done on Thursday, this hilling. And I'll show you some potatoes down there that look like these did. And so they take it really hard until you get a little bit of moisture and so, but they'll bounce back up and be super vibrant in here within a week. And then should be good harvested. Then within this area now, so we came in and we originally had, the northern forest, as you know it, white birch, white pine, maples, oaks, and came in, and now we started up at the top. There's blackberries?
Blackberries.
Blackberries, Jerusalem artichokes, and then there's a row of beans, and then there's a row that's in cover crop, and another row of beans, and a couple rows that are fallow, then onions, then an echinacea walking onion row, then the potatoes, then you got apples, thornless raspberries, and more annuals on down until you hit more forest garden down there. And as you off to the right there is this northern pecan and walnut with raspberry mix. So this is sort of what we're talking about, you know, this species succession and trying to build the soil. You know, you started with the northern forest, you're amplifying the soil, you're getting a lot of yields over time, and you're building into this long-term perpetuation, this perpetuity with the species. So that's more or less the concept.
Josh, when you cut this off, did you leave the roots in the ground?
Roots and everything. You can see that stump right there, that white pine, everything we left in. The pigs, you know, when we first got here, people would tell us the pigs would just pop up the stumps. You know, you just leave them with some cornflakes or something. They'll be happy and do all the work for you. But no, it's not like that at all. They'll work around stumps, but anything over 6 inches, they're not just popping it up and leaving it for you to do something with. Stumps are really hard to tend to. You know, a lot of energy in an excavator to pull them up, and then they don't bury well and they don't burn well. And I would rather have all that potential biomass in the soil.
Exactly.
All the vascular network that exists, all the biology, the organic material that exists is just very valuable, I feel like, where it is.
Yeah,
And so
it's essentially a hugelkultur.
Yeah.
Oh, exactly. It's essentially the hugelkultur. You can see how well the echinacea is doing on both sides of that pine stump. There's not a competition problem by any means for what we're growing there. If anything, it's just a long-term resource potential there.
So the soil around the pine tree is really acid, right? Under the pine tree, have you changed that?
The soil in New Hampshire is very acid. You know,
So do you have, is that lime you put down or something?
We will mess with wood ash a little bit on occasion to try to give you a little short term. But I think the real solution to the pH problem is organic material, and just putting so much organics to it that it's going to sweeten it over time. And it's not going to be something that's going to be rectified 1 year, next year. It's a long term. But I think to sweeten it, to get it so it looks like Vermont and New Hampshire, we need more organic material. That's what it's going to take. And so for us, like, we have chosen to put a lot of effort and energy into compost. Just big. You look at the side slope right there. That's
beautiful.
Some of the stuff we're deriving. We got a lot of it, and we cherish it.
Yay.
Really going for it with that stuff. The one thing I would mention, I wish I had a better demonstration of it right now, is the black plastic. You see, is drip irrigation. It's inline irrigation, and you just look at it. It's a type of emitter, so to speak, but it's inside the pipe, and it allows you it equalizes various pressures and can work at very low pressures, and will distribute the water evenly along the whole length of the pipe at very low pressures. It works very well. It doesn't clog. It's effective.
Where is that fed from?
Inline irrigation is fed from a tank up there. We have like an old water tank up on end, and we pump up water to it, and then it comes down via gravity.
There's a stream down this ravine.
There's a stream in the ravine. And what we'd like to do is go ahead and set us up with an open body of water up over here, so we can have 2 courses of that.
Yeah.
Integrate and have redundancy. Part of the demonstration. But they leave the elderberry. They know better than to eat the elderberry. But for the most part, they eat most everything else. You know, really put it to it. Yeah. It's poisonous. You shouldn't eat it raw. You should only. It's got a level of toxicity that you can dilute through, the cooking process.
Now they're okay.
Yeah, oh yeah, they come back and visit. But yeah, our pigs are skinny. You know, they're healthy, but they're lean. We're not pumping the grain to them. We're feeding them a whole bunch of weeds. We feed them our garden weeds. You see a big pile, and we just back the truck up. You know, they get like 2 or 3 truckloads of weeds per week. Plus, we'll give them what we get from our Main Street run. What I mean by the Main Street run is we'll go down to Plymouth and go all to the restaurants and get all their food scraps. You know, when they cut up carrots or, you know, they cut the tops off the carrots, they throw them in the 5-gallon bucket. We come pick them up twice a week.
I see they don't like citrus.
They don't really go for the citrus. We get the citrus type stuff from the grocery store. The grocery store, there's you know, probably, it's estimated between 1/3 and half of all the food produced in the United States goes to waste. And there's just a lot of inefficiencies in the stream. And, you know, at the grocery store, they got those big, about 5-pound bags of oranges. One of the oranges goes bad, in the bag, they toss the whole bag. They just don't even have the mechanism to make orange juice. They sell it, it comes all the way from Florida, but they don't have a press to make fresh juice. It always struck me that they would do well for themselves if they would take all that citrus and just send fresh juice to the door. But that would take paying somebody to do that. So. Oh well.
What are your plans for this area?
This area, you know, all these areas where we can get the pigs to concentrated, and they get in there and they do the manure business, and they fight back all the existing vegetation. Then we can come in, and here's a place where we could plant potatoes. We could come in next year and just put potatoes right on the ground, and then they would put a little compost over them, and then they would sprout up, and we'd just keep composting through the season, just like you saw in that upper field. So yeah, it wouldn't be hard right at this point to just do that in this space. Even with this vegetation that's here, it's not exactly a robust vegetation. But yeah, this whole field, you know, already has in it, there's a row of pear right there, and then a row of apples, and then a row of cherries further up. And all within that space is rows of, right now it's rows of squash, and then further up garlic. So that last year was all potatoes.
Potatoes is your first crop after your after the pigs, you're working on pigs?
Typically we're doing this potato, we're doing pig pasture to potatoes to field crops. And the reason is, we don't know why. It's just what's come to us. It works well because of how you cultivate the potatoes, how you're adding material in through the season. And it works well for us as well because we can add really raw stuff. You know, you can add some pretty not finished compost. I don't know how, because everyone's going to have to cook those potatoes. If I was hilling up spinach with raw compost, some people eat spinach raw, but nobody eats potatoes raw. Carrots, you wouldn't feel right. People eat raw carrots. So you can't put raw manure up against but so few crops. Potatoes, it could work for you.
Never will again.
Is the mother pig down there, the bigger pigs, is that the mom, or do you?
This is like the 4th or 5th generation of pigs we raised here, but I'm not sure we're going to keep going with it. We don't have a boar on site right now, and we don't have any sows. We have full freezers, and we have 13 pigs on site, so we might just go through this cycle of pigs. And this amount of meat will last us 3 or 4 years right now, maybe. And so we don't really have any. We raised pigs for 7 years. We'll probably raise these for another 3. We don't really have plans to keep breeding them.
Yeah, okay.
I think we might want to get into goats and get into a milking and more. We have like a lot of field space already. We got into this cycle of creating field space with pigs. Well, we might have about enough field space. And so the goats can fit into this landscape more in a forest or semi-forested system as opposed to this open field space. I think we can use the goats on tilted terrain. So particularly I'm thinking of that area right in front of us is sort of tilted. It'll never be field space per se, viable field space. So, but it's about 2-3 acres, maybe more, 4 or 5 we could put goats to. And use some of the existing pig house or pig infrastructure and you get going with some goat action. But it's about, there's ebbs and flows here. There was a time this spring there was nearly 60 pigs on site. We had 3 breeding sows and each one of them had a litter. Good lordy.
Oh, man.
60 pigs is way too much for our capacity. But you can see as well, this gives you a sense of what's going to grow well under a black walnut. Because these raspberries seem to be just doing Jimmy Dean great. So,
That great, huh? Jimmy Dean.
well, I think the black walnut will be pretty good because they're not like given a full shade as it is. You see the sunlight. That's different than what you get with other hardwood species. And also the black walnut is so slow growing, it leaves in real late. So the understory is able to get a good head start. Other trees jump right at it early. Poplar or something, the leaves come out, they'll go and gone. But black walnut, the leaves don't even come out till nearly June.
You get started on these and
Hard to resist, huh?
In terms of nut production, do they kind of have like peaks and valleys over the years? Because
don't they have like a mass gear? And
we had tons of them all over the place last year. And I didn't realize it was more at the time. I was like, oh. But I looked at this year.
Huh. Well, I think there are peaks and valleys, and I think as well as with the apple, it depends on, if the flower is the right time with the weather. You get a bunch of rain when it's flowering, or you get some cold weather snap that destroys the flower, and then you could be in bunk season. And I think they're also male and female, so I'm not sure. I need to look into some more of that plant information. Go ahead and get in there. We can go up here. We got more stuff.
Bye. Thanks for coming.